Hello, animators and artists. Anna Rossi is an animator and animation director who's worked in studios across Ireland and the UK, including Brown Bag Films, A Productions, and Kavaleer Productions. We invited Anna onto our live stream to discuss her journey to becoming an animation director, as well as walk us through some of a test rig that she's been working on in her spare time. Anna, welcome to the live stream.
Hello.
So, Anna, how would you describe the role of an animation director in a production, and what does a typical day look like in that role?
I think generally an animation director is like in charge of the animation department. So you dictate the style of the show and you make sure the quality is like consistent. And you also need to like make sure like your team is okay and also communicate with other departments. For me, a normal day is I get into work. That's very important. Then I check on my team. I like to have like a quick chat with everyone. And then I open my calendar. I check how many meetings I have. My meetings go from reviews of episodes, breakdown of new episodes, or sometimes we just have like meetings between HOD. Between meetings, I have like a very clear list of what I have to do divided by deadline. So I like to prep the next episode. I need to review different episodes at a time. I have to review even like 7 episodes at a time. And also obviously helping the team. I personally, I know it's not always the same, but I personally like to be approachable for the team. So I know in other production, the director is more like it doesn't communicate directly with animators, but I like to be in the same room, and if they have issues or if the leads have issues, then I'm there for them.
Yeah, and I know that you're someone who has become an animation director from having experience being an animator. Do you find that the role to becoming an animation director was it challenging? Was it something that was just sort of like a natural fit for you, or was it something that you had to like develop skills to take on that role?
For me, it was quite challenging because I am the cliche of the animator where I used to just love being at my desk, unbothered, and just animate all day. I wasn't really good at chatting with people. I used to have this like, even if I had to reply on a group chat, I used to have like these like small panic attacks just before sending a message. So obviously being the one talking all day was quite a challenge. But I'm grateful I did it because it's just good skills to have. And I think before, like as other animators, you just have these fears of interacting, and it's fine. Like, yeah, it was pretty good, but I went a long way. Like 2 years ago, I never accept to be here talking to you. So yeah.
So I have to ask then, what helped? What got you to be more confident when it comes to communicating?
Um, I think it's just like I am really again like double guessing myself. Like a lot of time is like, oh, am I gonna say the right thing? Oh, is this the right decision? Like decision making is such a big part of being an animation director. And my mom would say that it's because I'm a Gemini, but I'm really bad with decision making. So that really just helped me. Like you're under pressure, you need to make a decision that is like, you are responsible for an entire team and the quality of a show that will go on TV. So yeah, that was pretty. But then you kind of realize that you just need to go for it. Like trust your gut and say what you have to say. If you say something that is not like pertinent or is wrong, it's okay. No one is gonna like fire. Well, I mean, depending what you say, but usually you don't get fired.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're in a conversation, like there can be back and forth. People can ask you follow-up questions, and that's all right. I wanted to ask, how would you describe like the path that you took to working as an animation director in the UK? And I noticed that you're someone who's you started in Italy, you moved to Vancouver, you moved to the UK. What was that like for you?
So the path to be an animation director was quite straightforward. My first job was actually as a revisionist, so I would just work on retakes. Then I got promoted to regular animator. Then I got offered a position as a lead, and finally I got offered a position as a director. So yeah, I guess it was like quite not simple. Obviously, you need to work hard, but it was quite straightforward. My way from Italy to the UK was a bit less straightforward. So I am originally from a town near Venice. I spent 3 years in Milan studying graphic design just to realize I hate graphic design. But there was like a little course on animation, and that's when I was like, oh my God, I love these things. Um, so basically, after 3 years of like not wasted, but I kind of felt I was behind. I was looking for like a course that was quite short because a lot of the animation courses are like 3, 5 years, and that was like too much for me. I am not a patient person, so I found this 1 year course in Vancouver at the Vancouver Film School, and it's basically like 2 years condensed in one. So it's quite intense, but that's what I wanted. And also, like, I visited Canada like 2 years before, and I loved it. So I was like, yes, I'm moving to Canada. Packed my bag, went there, loved it, and then unfortunately, I didn't manage to stay because of like visa and stuff. So I had to move back to Italy. And then after 2 months, I got a job offer from the UK. So I packed my bag again and I came to the UK. And my first job again was with a 3 months contract. But you take what you can, I guess. And I stayed
Yeah.
here forever, maybe.
Well, I'm really glad that you found really cool roles in the UK. In your spare time, you've been working on 2D rigged characters. I saw you post on Instagram Prince Frog and Lord Bunnington. And I have to ask, what led you to designing and rigging these characters?
So I think it was like during a meeting one day, I was just sketching and I sketched this like little ugly frog that was basically a bull with long legs and a little crown. And like you can tell when you see something that is gonna be fun to animate. At the same time, I kind of wanted to challenge myself and do a proper rig. Um, so like a full turnaround rig with the formers, drawing swap. Because in the past, all the animation I did, I tried to do a rig, then I got bored and just jumped into animating. So I thought this design was pretty simple, and why not? And then Lord Bunnington just happened because every time I design a character, automatically I start thinking, who is this character? Where is it from? Why does it exist? And I start creating a whole backstory. And then Lord Bunnington was like, he is grumpy sidekick that was perfect for him.
Yeah. So I noticed that in the clip that you shared, your Lord Frog character leaps in the air, and there are smears and multiples applied to the sort of spin that he's doing, which I think is really cool, right? Like that is a traditional animation technique. Seeing it applied to rigged animation is always really interesting. How did you approach that effect in a character rig?
So I have different ways to start, like to approach smear frames in a character rig. My main two ways are either you pose the character, like the rig, and then you layer on top, just like a layer where you draw whatever smear you want to create. Or sometimes if the smear is like quite big, like for example, when my frog is in the air, that I would just turn off the rig and just go full traditional. What you can also do, again, depending on what the smear is, could be creating a drawing swap, for example, for the hands, or since I like my rig has envelope deformers on every single part, you can just use those. sometimes to deform the character. But yeah, my main tool is basically drawing either on top of the rig or instead of the rig.
Yeah, I think having the option to do that can create like really interesting, versatile scenes, and can really elevate like the type of production that you're trying to do. Do you want to take us on a quick tour of the rig that you made?
Sure. So should I share also the turnaround, or you just want to see the animation?
Let's look at the process. Like, what was the sort of design document that you used to start with this?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't think I have the design in
Oh,
here.
never mind. Sorry. If you just want
I
to show us
have,
the turnaround, then that works too.
yeah, I have, so, wait, let me show you. I have, this is just like, well, the original design that I did of the two of them.
They're so great.
That I kind of use, yeah. I kind of used it to see how they were working together. And I think it's also very important to have a reference for scale, especially because personally, I'm not really good with scale sometimes. I tend to go a bit wacky. So yeah, these are the dual. And then this is the character turnaround with the shadows integrated that I can turn off. I'm just gonna turn off this. And it's a full turnaround with like drawing swaps. Again, the hands took way too long, but I always feel in a
Wow.
production you never have enough hands drawing. So I tried to go very, like, I just basically drew the main hands, like almost a turnaround, and there's still not enough hand drawing. It's just a curse of animation.
Yeah. No matter what you
Um,
do, if you can draw hands, then you have job security.
yeah. I mean, these are very simple hands. I found even on one of the show where I work on, the rule was like the animators could not draw new hands. They were so scared of us just like
Wow.
drawing hands. So the designers had to draw the hands. But we kind of had to break the rule many, many times because the pipeline, like deadlines are tight and you're like, well, we won't help production, just draw hands. No one will notice. It's fine. But yeah, I mean, some people can draw hands, but that's okay. And then, yeah, also all lip sync for, well, lip sync. I also wanted to do master controllers, but I didn't get there because I wanted to animate, so I got bored. Um, but yeah, everything has the formers that you can activate, and that's it really. I can show you, this is the animation. So
That's excellent.
thank you. But yeah, so going back to the smear frames, they are basically, this is the rig and this is the layer with the smear frames. I always put a peg on top of any drawing I do, just because you never know when you want to move something. And you don't want to add a peg after because it just makes things weird. So the first, like, the deformation just comes from squishing and stretching the rig. And then here I basically, I did a bit of like smear frames on top, and I start turning off bits and bobs of the rig just to do like the transition between rig and smear frame a bit more smoothly. So from the next frame, this is just like a smear frame. And it's literally just two drawing that with the peg I stretched a bit and I moved up. And yeah, because I found like with smear frames, the reason why I love them is that
Mhm.
less is more. Like with two smear frame, two drawings, I got away with so much. And even with like quick movements, if you do the right smear, you will need less frames of animation, which is great. I just love like how in animation you can trick the eyes and make believe there's something else. Like you're seeing something that is not really happening, but it's also happening. Um, and then like here there is like a big pop between the smear and the rig, but again, because the animation is quite poppy and cartoony, you don't really notice. And then
It
I
works.
add some more. Sorry.
It works, right? Like you see the sort of it goes into a ball, and legs pop out. You don't question it. It just it
Yeah, no,
works very
exactly.
well.
Also, like I'm a big fan like of the rule of contrast. Like I always find in timing and shapes, contrast always works great. So even going from like a tight ball that is like almost stopping at the top to suddenly like a pop and a fall, it just always work. Just keep the eyes entertained, basically. And yeah, then there are some smears on the crown because I wanted to make it look like the crown kind of keeps spinning while he goes down, and then he catches it, and then literally like one frame there is this big thing, and that's it. And then this is just like all posed in the rig, and then he pops up
That's wild.
and goes first. But yeah, I love like in the rig, I love to put as many deformers as possible because then it just gives me so much flexibility. And then this animation I did in basically a couple of evenings after work. Like for the rigs, it took me ages, but then once that was done, the animation was just really. I mean, it wasn't super simple because I'll be honest, this rig is not perfect. It's a learning curve, but most of the things were there. You just literally need to pose it, and then it does the magic. Like when you need to in between two poses, they're like well posed. It's so easy. It's almost cheating.
So we talked about this a little bit before the live stream, but would you say that like your experience as an animator influenced the way that you approach rigging?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think like strong riggers are riggers that try to animate. What like I found a lot of times is like there is a difference between a rig that looks pretty, like with a lot of like handles and controls, which is like amazing, but then it's more complicated for an animator to actually animate. I like simple rigs, not simple as in they lack deformers and cutters and stuff, but simple as like visually it's clear what you have to click to select things. Because obviously, like I've noticed, you will have to give the rig to different level of experience. In like there are junior animators and maybe have never seen a rig, and yes, they will still be scared, but it will make sense fairly quickly. Like even inside the rig, I like. Well, I mean, it's not super tidy, but I like to keep it like divided in
Hey, you got
bounding
backdrops.
boxes. They are all labeled. Yeah, like just because. Yeah, it just makes sense. And um, yeah, so I think like thinking when you rig, you really want to think how I'm gonna move this, or also like a thing that I tend to do is like let's think about a very complicated pose. Is my rig able to do it? It won't always be able to do it because I mean, there are like limitation to any rig, but you wanna try to achieve that in a simple way.
I mean, even in the rig that like the animated scene that you just showed us, right? You show very dramatic squashing and stretching of this character, and it's great. I mean, one of the things that I really like about, especially like smear frames and those sort of really extreme poses, is I think that it's the sort of thing where like it's on screen for a fraction of a second, but you feel it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there are sometimes like we call them like cheat mirror frames where like in a lot of shows where I work on, you're not allowed really to do crazy smear frames, but you always try to sneak some in. And like the eye kind of notice it, but also not, but they are there. Like you can see that something is like more smooth or like something is happening, but you don't know what's happening.
So, Anna, as someone with a creative career, how do you approach working on projects in your spare time?
So I won't lie, it's hard, because a lot of days you just come home and you feel like all your creativity and energies are gone. For me, the main two things I do mostly for my mental health is do not put pressure on myself about, oh my God, you're not producing more. Because I'm sure like all of us are working hard during the day. And a second thing that I do is like never compare myself to other people that you see on Instagram or Twitter, like people that like every day seems they manage to post a new animation or a new drawing. And yeah, that's just like things that you absolutely need to avoid doing. Then what I do is like I need to find a project that I'm really passionate about. Like this Prince Frog, it was just like such a design that I loved since that little sketch that I did. And I really enjoy animation, and I really kept picturing in my head like all this crazy animation I could do with it. So that really gave me like good motivation, which sometimes is not enough. So what I tend to do to almost like trick myself, it sounds like I'm being my own mother, but I give myself like little tasks just to like convince myself to leave the sofa. And I'm like, well, you know what, tonight just do one pose, and then go back to binge watch whatever you want to binge watch. And sometimes I just do one pose and then I crawl back on the sofa with my cat and do nothing. But other time it's just like you start doing that pose and then you find yourself 2 hours later with half of the animation done. And it was just like, okay. But again, I am not like, I don't put pressure on myself on either, oh, tonight you did nothing or tonight you did too much. It's fine. I feel creativity needs to kind of like, when it happens, you can't put boundaries or things. Like another thing that I would say though, if you decide to do a bigger project, like I tend to do really small animations because I know now in my life I couldn't do like a big project because I know myself. um, if you want to do something bigger, definitely then you need a bit more scheduling. Like I love a nice schedule. I love like when you write down in a calendar what you're gonna do today, what you're gonna do tomorrow. But again, I will always start with like small tasks and then see where it goes. Because yeah, I always found like my friends that are more productive are people that actually don't work in the industry. Like they work at supermarket or
Hmm.
consultant, and then they have all this creativity. But for us, they actually spend all day just creating things. It's really hard.
No, that's very true. A couple of things I wanted to ask you about. So you shared a picture with an image of like your initial sketch with Lord Bunnington and Prince Frog. Those designs. One thing I really like is the amount of contrast between those two designs. Like Prince Frog is still a very round character, but he also has these spindly arms and legs. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the design process and like what you found really interesting about these two characters?
Um, yeah, I guess again, like Prince Frog just happened in my brain, and I just created it. Basically, it was just like a bouncing ball with legs. Um, yeah, for Lord Boddington, because of all the story that I'm forming in my head, I wanted something that was like the opposite. So one is green, one is pink, one is very happy, jumpy, the other one is very grumpy, which rhymes, but that wasn't on purpose. Um, and then with the design, I think for designs is the same thing as animation, where you want contrast, because contrast will always make something look interesting to the eye. So even with the design, I wanted something long and elevated and agile, and the other one is very like grounded and heavy, just also to give a bit away their personality, I guess.
One thing that I find really fascinating about animation is how multidiscipline it is, right? Like you have people working in this industry who have like work on projects that are very anatomical. You have like characters that like you need to know like the different like the way that like the muscles in the body are structured to be able to get a pose in perspective. But there's also like very graphic approaches where like you need to know what sort of designs have different types of appeal and like different ratios between different parts of a character's body for it to like draw the audience's eye in a certain way. Do you feel that like your background as a graphic designer influences the way that you both like design and animate characters?
That's a very interesting question. I guess it does, because when I was in graphic design, I think I naturally always had a quite a stylized style. But obviously, studying graphic design, they really teach you to like make something very graphic, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and then they teach you, yeah, all kind of things about contrast in shapes. The silhouette are really important. Like I always do this thing, even with juniors animator, when they try to do a pose, and I'm like, it's not working very well. And a way that you can do it is literally like just imagine the pose is a silhouette. Can you read it? If it's a no, then it's not working, basically. So yeah, definitely graphic design helped me a lot, even like with composition, colors, things like that. I mean, I'm still very terrible at like drawing backgrounds, for example, and with colors in general. Color theory was never my strength. Like for example, I want to put backgrounds. You will notice my animation miss backgrounds most of the time, and it's just because I don't know how to do them. But it's a work in progress.
You've one of the things I find really interesting are like the different skill sets that people can bring to animation and like how their own experiences can lead to different like breakthroughs or different techniques and creativity. Do you find that people in the animation industry that you've interacted with, do you feel they've all sort of come through like one route, like they went to animation school and became animators, or do you find that people tend to make their way into the industry in more unconventional ways?
I found the majority of people that I've met, at least, went to animation school. There was also a good bunch of people that, like me, went to graphic design and then hated graphic design. So that's a way. Well, didn't hate it, but they were like, well, between motion graphic and animation, like, I don't know. Um, I met few people that they weren't in animation, but they were in other department that came from, I think one was from architecture, and then they became like a scene prep artist. So I guess like potentially anyone really can get into the industry. But the majority of people I found is people that, lucky for them, already knew what they wanted to do before uni. Because some people find their ways a bit later on in life, and it's okay.
Yeah, I just think it's always fascinating to hear like people's different ways into the industry. Um, on a similar note, like what skills do you think are important for artists who are considering working up to an animation director role?
For me, it was really important, like time management. Like you really need to be good at trying to schedule your days and also the time of your team. Um, Also, I guess, well, as I said before, decision making, it's quite important. And multitasking. Like there were days where I had to be in a meeting, but then also solve an issue with another department, but also review an episode, but also prepping another episode, but also have the animators asking me questions. So you kind of need to be good, which is not always possible, but you really need to be good to keep in mind all these different things or find ways to remember things. Like a lot of times, if I was like rushing into a meeting, but someone asked me a question, I was just writing on my hand or whatever I had there, just to like, because otherwise I would forget. Like, you won't just keep thinking about the other thing. So I love post notes. Those are like all over my desk or my hands, but then you wash your hands, and I always found that thing where then you wash your hands and it's useless. And I made a mistake of covering my arms with tattoos, so now I can't use my arms anymore.
There's
So
limited
that
real
was my
estate.
bad. Yeah. But
Um,
yeah, I
is there
think.
anything that you'd want
Oh
to
yeah,
put out
sorry.
as like advice for? Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. Is there anything you'd want to put out as like advice for animators and artists who are working in the industry? Things that maybe come up as like feedback that maybe you'd want to put out into the universe?
Uh, I guess it's like if you want to work in the industry, like especially how things are now, I would say take any chance you can, especially if you want to get into the industry, but also know your worth. Like I think if you go to an interview or like you apply for a job, know how much you want to get paid, ideally, and then know how much you are happy to, like, like they won't always offer you whatever you ask. Um, but also like just give it a go to different things, because you never know, like it happens, like you just get into a company and then maybe that's not the role you want to do. Like I remember my first job that I almost got was for Titmouse, but was as a compositor. And I was like,
Mm.
yeah, sure, I love it, I'll do it. But then my aim was like, I'll get into the company and then I'll go into animation. Um, I mean, I failed the step one, getting into the company, but that's a good way. Or just like, yeah, get like, don't think, especially if it's gonna be your first job, don't be like, oh, this show, I don't know, I don't like it, or just go for it. Stay humble, but also know how much you're worth, because a lot of time people will try to like exploit you or underpay you.
Yeah, I think one of the challenging things about the animation industry is one of those industries where a lot of people want to get into it, and if something is your dream job, it's the thing that I always wanted to do. Um, it can be a little dangerous because people can exploit you, and you should know, like, animation is a career. It is a job. You are making something for a company that should be paying you a fair wage.
Yeah, and also I found with our artists in general, there is always this like legend and like stereotype of the poor artist. We don't have to be poor. We can be rich. Like, I mean, I have this conversation many times with friends that are like doctors or lawyers, and they're like, well, like, I'm not saying I want to be paid as much as a doctor, but my skills and my time are like our skills and our time are very important as well. Like, imagine a world without cartoons. What are you going to show your kids at breakfast? Like, I don't know. Like, again, I'm not comparing myself with like doctors, lawyers, but I just want to like put an end to this like legend of like poor artists, because we don't have to be poor. We can be able to own our own houses and own new clothes. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, people spend a lot of time watching animation and film artwork. It's part of the conversation. It's part of things that people engage in. Um, do you have advice for artists who are interested in building their own character rigs in their spare time? Like, how did you work up to building this rig, and what lessons can other artists learn from that?
So for me, because I'm a big fan of lists, I made a big list of like different steps from the design till the rig, and the list kind of helped me to like divide a quite big task, especially if you're not used to rigging, a very big scary task into smaller tasks. So I would be like, okay, tonight I do character turnaround, tomorrow I do hand drawings, and so on. And basically, when I've learned how to rig, I've learned it through the Toon Boom Learn course, and that is already kind of like divided in classes. and that really helped me to kind of like give myself like steps in the process. So you want to be organized. Like the worst thing you can do is like miss a step and then have to go back because it takes longer and it can get tedious. Again, you make mistakes and you learn. But yeah, for me, it was like trying to divide the big task in smaller tasks and trying to schedule them in and also have fun, I guess.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people, when they start using software like Harmony, the very first thing they want to do is, okay, I'm going to just build a character rig. Like, let's go, let's do it. And if you like look at the Learn portal, the very first thing that it tells you to build is an arm. You know, like you sort of
Yeah.
have to understand the principle of like, okay, how do we make this piece work? And then we can put, little pieces together. So what was your experience like going through those tutorials and working on like the different pieces? Like, did you find that frustrating, or did you find that like, okay, this is how this piece works, and this is how I put these together? Keeping in mind that like I realize that you're someone who like throughout your career has worked with like cutout character rigs too.
Um, yeah, I guess for me, so watching the tutorials, a lot of things, especially in the early classes, I already kind of knew them. Because something that, so I found some animators when they work with rigs, they're very scared of the rig. They
Oh,
don't open the rig. I don't know. I found it very weird. I've learned a lot about rigs, basically breaking rigs. Like I was a nightmare for the rigging department in my first job because I was breaking them constantly. But then I was learning how to fix them and I was learning how they work. And I would even ask questions to the riggers like, how does this do this, blah, blah. And then I made my very first rig, just because I love cats, was a little rig of my cat. Not even a turnaround. It was just like a quarter front view. But, you just make something very simple, very ugly and a bit, yeah, not the best rig. But again, you learn so much just trying. And then when I had a chance, well, I found out about the classes because I didn't know it was a thing. So when I found out about them during lockdown, I just started watching them. But I already had on the side my own design that I kind of tweaked following the classes. And then, I slowly like kind of apply what I was learning to the rig, which I found very, very helpful, really. But yeah, most of it I kind of already, like the basics, I kind of already knew from working with rigs. So yeah, I guess like a big advice if you're working with a rig is don't be scared of the rig. I usually have the rig open in the node view just because sometimes I just go into the rig and select pegs or stuff directly from there. It's not scary once you know your way around.
can you scrub back to that frame where like the Frog King is like pulling the crown back onto his head?
Uh, this one?
The one where he sort of fixes it back and he's had that like extreme squash.
Oh, yeah, this.
Um, what I love about that so much is like there are a lot of people who think of like 2D puppet, 2D cutout animation, 2D rigged animation as being like very stiff and very like here's a paper doll and you just sort of like move the joints around. But like this is this is like the ultimate squash and stretch animation. This is just like the most squash. And I just love it.
Yeah, like one thing that I always tell the animators is like the rig is just like a reference, but don't be
Mhm.
scared to move it around. What I usually do, just because it helps me, is I sketch these poses on top because sketching helps me create the volume and understand where things go. Like I still remember the very first time I started doing it, I had to animate a dragon just kind of like flying away from camera. And I tried to do it just from the rig, and it was just not looking right. So then I almost went frame by frame sketching it, and then just putting lines for the volumes to just give me like a guide. And then you just pose the rig. And again, that's why I love envelope deformers because they just adjust to whatever you need. And it's a back and forth of following your sketch and then checking obviously the turnaround to keep the character on model. Well, I mean, this one is not on model, but you know what I mean. So yeah, it's always like, just don't be scared, because the rigs are just, you know, you govern the rigs. It's not the rigs that drives you. It's
Yeah.
you are the animator.
I think there's almost a divide between animators who do all of the sort of like rough and posing with rigs first and then refine things down like that way, and people who draw the roughs by hand and then move the rigs to match afterwards. And I think that often like roughing it out first is the way that you get like more expressive animation, is the way that you get like a more interesting pose.
Oh yeah, I think I have my rough here. Like, I love to do a very like rough at the beginning, just to like feel the vibe. So you can say it's
Yeah.
just like you get it there, but like, and you just go crazy once you sketch it. Again, wait, let me turn off also this mirror. I guess, yeah, the rig can be stiff on its own, but then that's why you just sketch it and then you get it. You get the general vibe of the animation.
What was the most challenging part of this character rig?
Uh, I think, hmm, I think, well, the shadows were pretty annoying, the one on the body, but I decided
Hmm.
to have them, so it's my fault. Um, yeah, I just wanted to be fancy. Um, I kind of sometimes hate when you have to have the outline to divide, like outline appearing or not appearing. That's a lot of like
Hmm.
cutter system that just drives you mad. And earlier I was like mentioning how proud I was of the legs with a double deformer. I kind of hate it in the end, because like you're not sure which deformers you need to use, and obviously if you use the bone deformer to foreshorten like a leg, it will break the envelope, and it's like, I don't know. Um, but yeah, and as always, not enough hands, never enough hands. But yeah.
And what are you most proud of on this rig?
Um, I mean, just because I like to keep things tidy, I kind of like my little handles that I put. I wish I could have done two different colors, because sometimes they overlap and they get confusing. Uh, but yeah, I think I kind of like also the design. I feel even with the mouths, well, you can't really see many, but even with mouth, I realize, it's like a tiny, you need to keep it goofy, you need to keep it, I don't know, interesting. Kind of had fun with those. And I'm also just proud that I finished finally a full turnaround rig. And I haven't done like in the past where it's like half done, half not, but I just start animating because, yeah. So.
What are the sort of poses that you like using for like trying out a rig? You know, like what are your sort of go-tos when it comes to like, okay, I have a rig, trying to figure out what I can do with this, and if it works well, what's the sort of first thing you try to make a rig do?
I think the first thing is like, I usually do like a jump on the spot, like quite an extreme jump. Like I want to see the legs having to bend and overlap with the body. And I want to see, like, not specifically with this rig, but even sometimes at my job, I had to do some rig testing. I want to see how easy it is to like bend the torso and like move around things in the face to give the sense that the face is like tilting down. So I always found, because the jump has kind of everything you need, where like you have a bit of tilt, you have a bit of stretch and squash. That always kind of is my go-to, and also it's kind of quick to do, because obviously, especially if you need to like test a rig like during like pipeline, you don't have like hours to just play around with the rig. It's like, okay, I have half an hour to try this rig. But yeah, the main thing is like always sometimes just do very crazy poses, just like try to break it and see if it's hard to break it, then it's a great rig. If it's easy to break, oh well.
And like, do you feel that your experience as a animation director influences your approach to animation and also your approach to making rigs?
Uh, well, I guess now I'm even more aware of deadlines. Obviously, if you do animation in your in free time, you don't really have a deadline, but also I feel I will always have a deadline in my head. It's just something you can't get rid of. It's like a PTSD of the director. Um, yeah, so like I think animation and rigging, I try to make things that obviously are appealing but also simple. But with rigs, I would say like again a rig that gives me a lot where I need to work less in the animation phase. Um, with animation, I don't know. Like the thing I think that changed the most is I am so picky with my own animations. Where like sometimes I go back to my animation the day after. Like I even noticed earlier, one of the arm is a bit like wonky, like at this frame. I'm like, oh, the curve could be better, but it's okay.
I mean, there's always something else. There are just so many moving parts in animation. There's always something to tweak.
Oh yeah, and then yeah, I guess as an
Uh,
animation director, you spend your days just finding problems in other people's animations, and it's like, oh well.
would you say that's almost like more? We say it's more of a blessing than a curse, then, or
I don't know, because I've noticed that even when I start studying and being an animator, I think it's a curse sometimes because you can't watch one show without being like, ooh, that arc was really nice, or ooh, that frame popped. And it's like even watching the show, I think I even watched one of my old show reels and I saw something popping between frames and I was like, oh my god, it just gets worse and worse the more like you have experience in the industry.
yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting how like when you learn about like animation or filmmaking, it changes the way that you watch animation in movies. Where you're like, oh, that was an interesting cut, and like everyone else is like, what are you talking about?
Oh, yeah, or like that really broke my heart where like growing up I loved Scooby-Doo, and I mean Scooby-Doo is not the greatest animation and I feel a lot of people just make fun of Scooby-Doo, and then even watching it now there are literally frames where the coloring is missing from some bits of the character.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I used to enjoy it so much. Like, and now, I mean, I still enjoy it, but I'm also aware that it's not like the best.
Yeah, I mean the like early Hanna-Barbera stuff, right? Like they did so much with like no budget. It's actually kind of amazing. You have to have like a certain amount of respect or fascination with like how they made it, you know? Like given all the limitations, you know, you still had an entertaining TV show.
Yeah. And then I also think, like, this is something I always say, even at meetings and reviews, when they're like, oh, that little thing is popping there. And I was like, as a child, I'm not saying I was a smart child, but as a child, I enjoyed all these shows. Like, I don't think children will be like, "Ooh, look at a little thing popping in the background," or "Look at that composition being a bit off." I mean, maybe children nowadays are a bit more evolved than what I was, but I just loved everything. They could just feed me whatever cartoon, and I would have loved it. Like things moving, stretching, squashing. That's it.
Yeah, I think it's always an interesting balance, right? Like when do you say, all right, this is good enough, we can release this, or when do you really need to refine things down? I don't think there's any um objective answer. It's just like, where's your standard? Where do you draw that line?
Yeah, I think
And how much
like
budget do you have?
I think obviously again we always like work with like deadlines, but I think like the final line is like, does the person that actually put the money, or the company actually put the money for the show, likes it, then that's the line. We're happy if they're happy.
All right, Anna, we are almost out of time. Where can our viewers find more of your work on the web?
I guess mainly on Instagram, at Iguanimation. I'll try to post a bit more about the rigs because I do have some more things to show. But yeah.
And is there anything else about this rig that we haven't asked you about that you really want to share?
I guess not really. Yeah, no. It's a very simple rig. What you see is what it is.
All right, because I really enjoyed asking questions about it, and I again was just really wowed to see that smear frame in that little clip, and the amount of like extreme squash and stretch, the poses. It was really excellent. So thank
Thank
you,
you.
Anna, for joining us to discuss your career as an animation director and for taking us a tour on your Frog King rig. And thank you to our audience for tuning in as well. If you enjoyed this discussion and are interested in rigging your own character and going through the Learn portal on toonboom.com, artists can download a 21-day free trial of Harmony Premium from our website. The website is toonboom.com. Our next live stream is an art stream with Marie-Eve Lasselle on tools and techniques for traditional animation in Harmony, and you won't want to miss it. So thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in next time.